Example 2, blended payment on a $2,042 loan were $418 per month. Interest was charged at 9% per annum, calculated on a monthly unpaid balance. Construct a complete repayment schedule for the loan, including total for amount paid, interest paid, and principal repaid. So what we have in the diagram here is we have number of payments. We have 5 payments in total, and at time 0, this is how much we owe. This is the balance after the payment. So this is at time 0. This is how much we have, which we owe $2,042. And our first step is basically labeling each column as column A, B, C, D, E. So it's easier to understand the formula that we're going to use. The first formula that we're going to use is for column C. Column C is the interest paid. So interest paid, the formula for interest paid is I equals to PRT. P is how much we owe, R is the interest rate, and then T is the time. So to calculate the 1532, what we did was we take the P. P is how much we owe at the beginning of the period. So at the beginning of period 1, we owe $2,042. So that's RP. And the R is the 9% given in the question. That's 9% per annum. So that's the interest rate per year. And then our T is 1 over 12 because this is monthly payments. So we're given that this is monthly payments. So we're paying $418 per month. So our T is 1 over 12. So once we times these 3 numbers together, I equals PRT, we're going to get 1532, and that's what we put down as the first number. To calculate column D, the amount we paid, what we're going to do is we're going to take column B, which is the amount paid, $418. The $418, we subtract that from the interest paid. And that makes sense because when you make a payment, there are 2 portions. When you make a payment, there are 2 portions. The first portion is the interest paid. The second portion is the principal we paid. So you made $418 payments. And from that $418 payments, $15 went into interest. So that means the rest went into paying down your principal. So $15 went into paying interest. So that means $402.68 went into paying off your principal. And that's your principal we paid. So that's why we have column B minus column C will give you the principal we paid. Once we calculate principal we paid, then we can calculate the balance after payments. And the balance after the payment is what we have at the beginning of the period, which is column A minus column D. So column A is what we owe at the beginning of the period, which is $2,042. And then what we paid off during the period is $402. So the difference between $2,042 minus the $402, that will give you the $1,639. That's how much money we owe at the end of period 1. And what we owe at the end of period 1 is what we owe at the beginning of period 2. So that's why column A equals to column E previous. So what we owe at the beginning of period 2 is what we owe at the end of the first period. So again, what we owe at the end of the first period is what we owe at the beginning of the next period, which is period 2. We owe $1,639 at the beginning of period 2. And then again, we have the same payment, $418 payment. And then column C, same formula, I equals PRT. So what we owe at the beginning of the period is $1,639.32. That's how much we owe at the beginning of the period, times 9% times 1 over 12 for the T. And then we're going to get the $1,229. So that's why we have the $1,229 here. We take the $1,639 at the beginning of the period, times 9%, and then times 1 over 12 to get 12.29. So that's the interest paid for the second period. Once we have the interest paid for the second period, then we take 418 minus the 12.29, and that will give you the principal we paid for period 2, which is 405.71. Once you have the principal we paid for period 2, you take what you owe at column A, what you owe at the beginning of period 2, 1639, minus the 405, and that will give you the 1233.61. So that's the ending balance for period 2. And so on for period 3, and same for period 4. So at the end of period 4, what we calculated is that we owe $413.05, and how we calculated that is we take the 824 from the beginning of the period minus the 411, the principal we paid in period 4, and that gives you the difference, which is the 413. So that's how much we owe at the end of period 4. So what we owe at the end of period 4 is what we owe at the beginning of period 5. So that's why we put the same number, 413.05. That's how much we owe at the beginning of period 5. And what you need to understand is that for the last payment is going to be different. It's not going to be 418. The reason it's not going to be exactly equal to 418 is because we need to pay off our debt. We need to clear off the balance. So therefore, the last payment is not going to be 418. It's going to be some different number. And we need to calculate that number. And how we calculate that number is what you need to know is that at the end of period 5, we have to pay off the debt. So therefore, our principal reduction has to equal to what we owe at the beginning of the period. So that equals to the 413.05. Once we understand the principal we paid is basically what we owe at the beginning of the period, 413.05. Then we can calculate the interest paid. Interest paid is basically your 413.05. This is how much we owe at the beginning of the period, times 9%, times 1/12, and that will give you the 310. And that's the interest paid for the period 5. Once we have the interest paid, once we have the principal we paid, we can work backward to find out the amount paid by adding these two numbers. We can add the interest paid plus the principal we paid to get the amount paid. And then when we add 310 plus 413.05, we're going to get 416.15. And that's example 2.